Welcome to Jazz Vibrations, a space where the soul meets the notes and where jazz becomes the soundtrack of our deepest emotions. Jazz, more than a musical genre, is an intimate conversation between the heart and the world. It is that spark of freedom that invites improvisation, breaking the rules and finding beauty in the unexpected. From the warm melodies of a saxophone to the daring trumpet solos, jazz tells stories without words, letting each note speak for itself. In this program, we will explore those sounds that have witnessed starry nights, unrequited loves, and dreams born in the darkness. We will travel through the history of jazz, its legendary figures, and those magical moments where music becomes something bigger, a bridge to the eternal. Each episode will be a journey towards the very essence of jazz, a space for those who seek inspiration in the sublime, in what escapes logic and resides in pure feeling. His nickname, Satchmo, seemed to encapsulate it all, a mix of satchel mouth for his wide smile and an onomatopoeia of his trumpet style, broad, generous. Louis Armstrong didn't just play the trumpet, he sang it, he made it laugh, he made it cry. Born into poverty in New Orleans at the beginning of the 20th century, Armstrong absorbed the language of jazz from its roots. He grew up surrounded by street bands, improvisations at funerals, and the vibrant energy of Storyville, the red light district where music flowed like the Mississippi. Satchmo elevated the trumpet to a solo instrument, freeing it from its accompanying role. His improvisations, full of swing and amazing technique, became the soundtrack of an era, the Roaring Twenties, and transcended borders, taking jazz to all corners of the world. But Louis Armstrong was more than a trumpet virtuoso. His rough and warm voice, full of natural charm, conquered the public with its mix of joy and melancholy. Songs like "What a Wonderful World" and "When the Saints Go Marching In" became universal anthems, conveying a message of hope and optimism that still moves us today. Louis Armstrong's smile, reflected in every note he played, in every phrase he sang, continues to shine with the same intensity, reminding us of the transformative power of music and its ability to unite people through the universal language of emotion. To say Duke Ellington is to speak of elegance, sophistication, an orchestral sound that transcended the boundaries of jazz to become synonymous with the golden age of big bands. Edward Kennedy Ellington, born in Washington, D.C. in 1899, was not only an exceptional pianist and composer, but also a visionary conductor who knew how to create a unique and unmistakable sound. Ellington didn't compose songs, he wrote authentic orchestral suites, exploring the timbral possibilities of each instrument and creating complex arrangements that fit like a glove to the personality of his musicians. His orchestra, a true musical family that remained united for decades, featured some of the best instrumentalists of the time, such as Johnny Hodges, Cootie Williams, or Ben Webster, to whom Ellington provided space for improvisation within his elaborate compositions. Take the A Train, Mood Indigo, Sophisticated Lady, Caravan. The list of classics composed by Duke Ellington seems endless. His melodies, imbued with melancholic lyricism and irresistible swing, became the soundtrack of an era, evoking the atmosphere of Harlem nightclubs, where music flowed until dawn. But beyond his commercial success, Duke Ellington always fought for the recognition of jazz as a serious and respected art form. His compositions, imbued with a harmonic depth and rhythmic complexity that broke with traditional schemes, earned him critical acclaim and established him as one of the great composers of the 20th century. Duke Ellington, the Duke of Jazz, left an indelible legacy on the history of American music. His music, elegant, sophisticated, and eternally modern, continues to captivate new generations of listeners, proving that jazz in his hands became a sublime and universal art. The nickname Bird, short for Yardbird, chicken, acquired in his early days, became a metaphor for his music free, fast, capable of reaching the highest peaks of improvisation. Charlie Parker, alto saxophonist born in Kansas City in 1920, revolutionized the world of jazz with his frantic and virtuoso style, giving rise to a new way of understanding improvisation, bebop. Parker burst onto the jazz scene in the 40s, a time of change and effervescence after World War II. Bebop, with its complex harmonies, irregular rhythms, and dizzying speed, became the soundtrack of a generation seeking to break with conventions and explore new sonic territories. Bird's improvisations were an explosion of creativity, a whirlwind of notes that challenged the limits of the instrument. His phrasing, angular and surprising, broke with the linearity of traditional jazz, creating his own language, complex and fascinating. But Charlie Parker's life was as intense and brief as his music. Haunted by drugs and personal problems, Bird died at the age of 34, leaving behind an immense musical legacy and a legend that still inspires musicians around the world. His music, revolutionary and unclassifiable, expanded the horizons of jazz, opening unexplored paths that would influence later generations of musicians. Charlie Parker, the bird that flew too close to the sun, left us with a musical legacy that continues to shine with the same intensity, reminding us that freedom and creativity know no bounds. Chapter 4. Miles Davis, the Prince of Darkness. Miles Dewey Davis III, the name already resonated with a historical weight, with a musical heritage that promised greatness. Born into a wealthy family in Illinois in 1926, Miles Davis inherited not only the name of his grandfather, a prominent landowner and businessman, but also an unwavering determination and pioneering spirit that would make him one of the most influential musicians of the 20th century. His trumpet, with a warm, melancholic yet penetrating sound, became an instrument of change, a catalyst for musical revolutions. From his beginnings in the smoky clubs of 52nd Street in New York, sharing the stage with giants like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, Davis forged a reputation as an innovator, a restless artist who refused to be pigeonholed into a single genre. Bebop, cool jazz, modal jazz, fusion jazz. Each stage of Miles Davis's career was a constant exploration, an incessant search for new sounds, new textures, new forms of expression. Albums like Birth of the Cool, Kind of Blue, or Bitches Brew not only marked a before and after in the history of jazz, but transcended the boundaries of the genre, influencing popular music, rock, electronic music, and practically all genres that dared to challenge conventions. Miles Davis, the Prince of Darkness, with his enigmatic figure, dark glasses, and distant attitude, became a cultural icon, a symbol of the artistic avant-garde. His music, always evolving, defying expectations and breaking down barriers, reminds us that true greatness lies in constant searching, in refusing to settle for the established, in the courage to explore the unknown. Chapter 5. John Coltrane, A Cry of Supreme Love. John Coltrane, a name that evokes spirituality, inner searching, and an overflowing passion channeled through the tenor saxophone. Born in North Carolina in 1926, Train, as he was affectionately known, transformed pain and personal struggle into music of a transcendental beauty, taking jazz to new spiritual dimensions. His early years were marked by tragedy, the death of his father when he was only 12 years old, the struggle against addiction, the incessant search for his own musical voice. But it was precisely in overcoming adversity that Coltrane found the strength and inspiration to create music that transcended language barriers and connected directly with the human soul. His sound, powerful and volcanic, was capable of expressing an immeasurable emotional range, from the most moving tenderness to the most harrowing fury. His solos, extensive and hypnotic, were authentic spiritual journeys, sonic explorations that challenged the conventions of traditional jazz and ventured into unexplored territories. A Love Supreme, his masterpiece recorded in 1965, is a moving testament to his deep spirituality. A hymn to divinity, a musical prayer divided into 4 movements representing searching, resolution, will, and grace. A masterpiece of jazz that transcends labels and stands as a monument to the human capacity to transform suffering into beauty. John Coltrane, a tormented soul who found his redemption in music, left us a legacy of passion, spirituality, and an incessant search for truth. His music, a cry of supreme love that resonates through time, continues to inspire generations of listeners, reminding us that beauty can arise even in the darkest of places. Chapter 6. Billie Holiday, the voice of pain and hope. Eleanor Fagan Gow, a name that evokes the tragedy of a stolen childhood, of a life marked by adversity. But from the ashes of pain and abandonment, a phoenix would rise, a voice that would move the world with its vulnerability and heartbreaking strength. Billie Holiday. Born in Philadelphia in 1915, Lady Day, as Lester Young, her friend and musical partner, nicknamed her, transformed suffering into art, sadness into beauty. Her voice, broken and fragile, yet full of a unique emotional intensity, became the perfect vehicle for performing the songs of love and heartbreak, hope and despair that marked her career. Billie Holiday didn't just sing, she whispered. She moaned, she cried the words, turning every phrase into an intimate confession, an outpouring of truth. Her phrasing, free and intuitive, broke with the conventions of traditional singing, creating her own unique, inimitable style that made her one of the most personal and influential voices in the history of jazz. Strange Fruit, a song that denounced the lynching of African Americans in the southern United States, became her anthem, a harrowing cry against racial injustice that earned her the admiration of many and the censorship of others. Billie Holiday, with her courage and brutal honesty, became a symbol of the struggle for civil rights, a voice that rose up against oppression and discrimination. Lady Day, a tortured soul who found refuge and a way of expressing herself in music, left us a legacy of raw emotions, of vulnerability turned into strength. Her voice, a song to life in spite of pain, continues to resonate today, reminding us that beauty can arise even in the darkest of places. Chapter 7. Thelonious Monk, the Hermit of the Piano. Thelonious Sphere Monk, a name that evokes mystery, eccentricity, and a musical genius that defied conventions. Born in North Carolina in 1917, Monk was an iconoclast, a visionary who created his own sound world, full of dissonance, angular rhythms, and a unique musical logic that made him one of the most original and influential composers of the 20th century. His piano, sometimes percussive, sometimes delicate, was an extension of his mind, an instrument to explore the infinite possibilities of harmony and rhythm. His compositions, full of unexpected twists, eloquent silences and melodies that seemed to emerge from a dream, challenged the listener's expectations, inviting them to enter a fascinating and disconcerting sonic labyrinth. Monk was like no other, neither in his music nor in his way of being. His extravagant clothing, his thick-rimmed glasses, his habit of getting up from the piano in the middle of a performance to dance or simply to observe the audience, made him a legendary character, a true original in the broadest sense of the word. Round midnight, straight, no chaser, Blue Monk. His compositions have become jazz standards, performed and reinterpreted by generations of musicians who have found in his music an inexhaustible source of inspiration. Thelonious Monk, the Hermit of the Piano, the misunderstood genius who for years lived in the shadow of his own legend, left us a unique and unrepeatable musical legacy. His music, a challenge to logic and convention, reminds us that true originality lies in the constant search for one's own voice, in the courage to be different, in the freedom to create without ties or limitations. Chapter 8. Ella Jane Fitzgerald, a name that evokes sweetness, joie de vivre, and a prodigious vocal technique that made her the First Lady of Song. Born in Virginia in 1917, Ella possessed an innate gift for music, a prodigious voice that spanned 3 octaves and an astonishing ability to improvise that made her one of the most versatile and influential singers in the history of jazz. Her voice, clear and powerful, was capable of conveying an immeasurable emotional range, from the most moving tenderness to the most overflowing joy. Her mastery of scat, a vocal improvisation technique that involves using the voice to imitate the sounds of instruments, made her a true force of nature, capable of challenging the best instrumentalists with her virtuosity and creativity. Her repertoire ranged from jazz standards to pop, swing, and bossa nova. She collaborated with some of the most important musicians of her time, such as Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie, leaving an impressive discography that includes such gems as Mac the Knife, Summertime, and A-Tasket. But beyond her innate talent, Ella Fitzgerald conquered audiences with her charisma, her infectious smile, and her boundless energy. Her concerts were a true celebration of music, a whirlwind of swing, improvisation, and good humor that left audiences wanting more. Ella Fitzgerald, the First Lady of Song, left us a legacy of joy, virtuosity, and passion for music. Her voice, immortal as jazz itself, continues to inspire generations of singers, reminding us that music at its finest is capable of uniting people and conveying universal emotions. Chapter 9. Charles Mingus, a name that evokes fury, overflowing passion, and a constant struggle against the social injustices that marked his life and his music. Born in Arizona in 1922, Mingus was a complex and contradictory artist, a musical genius who challenged conventions and rebelled against any kind of label or limitation. His music, a whirlwind of emotions that ranged from the most moving tenderness to the most visceral rage, was a reflection of his own personality, a melting pot of influences ranging from traditional jazz to classical music, gospel and blues. His compositions, complex and challenging, were full of unexpected tempo changes, dissonant harmonies, and an overwhelming rhythmic energy that made them true sonic experiences. Mingus was not only a virtuoso bassist, but also an innovative composer, a demanding conductor, and a political activist who used his music as a platform to denounce the racial discrimination and social injustice that plagued American society at the time. Albums like The Black Saint and The Sinner Lady, Mingus or Let My Children Hear Music are masterpieces of modern jazz, complex and challenging compositions that broke with the conventions of the genre and explored new forms of musical expression. Charles Mingus, the rebel of jazz, left us a legacy of passion, social commitment, and an incessant search for freedom, both in music and in life. His music, a cry of protest against injustice, continues to resonate today, reminding us of the power of music as a tool for social transformation and personal expression. Chapter 10. Herbie Hancock, a name that evokes innovation, fusion, and a constant search for new musical horizons. Born in Chicago in 1940, Hancock became one of the most influential pianists and keyboardists in modern jazz, a true visionary who managed to fuse the language of jazz with the energy of funk, rock, electronic music, and world music, creating his own sound, unmistakable and ahead of its time. His beginnings in the world of jazz were marked by the figure of trumpeter Miles Davis, with whom he collaborated in the 60s on albums that marked a before and after in the history of the genre, such as ESP, Nefertiti, or Miles in the Sky. In 1969, he formed his own band, Mwandishi, with which he explored the possibilities of jazz fusion, creating a psychedelic and experimental sound that would influence later generations of musicians. Headhunters, his most successful album, released in 1973, became a bestseller, fusing funk with jazz in a way never heard before. Songs like Chameleon or Watermelon Man became anthems of the decade, proving that jazz could be danceable, accessible, and at the same time complex and innovative. Throughout his long career, Herbie Hancock has collaborated with artists such as Stevie Wonder, Joni Mitchell, Carlos Santana, and Wayne Shorter, demonstrating an astonishing versatility and adaptability. His music, always evolving, has transcended the boundaries of jazz, influencing genres such as hip-hop, house, and electronic music. Herbie Hancock, a true architect of the jazz future, has taught us that music has no limits, that the fusion of styles and constant experimentation are the key to keeping alive the spirit of jazz, a constantly evolving genre that continues to inspire new generations of musicians. And so the music plays on. Through the decades, through the generations, jazz persists, not as a relic of the past, but as a vital force constantly evolving that feeds on its roots but always looks to the future. The stories we have told here are just a small sample of the vastness of the jazz universe. Each musician, each note, each improvisation is a testament to the transformative power of music, its ability to unite people, to express the inexpressible, to remind us that, despite the difficulties, life is always worth living with passion, with intensity, with swing. Jazz is not just music, it is a way of life, an attitude towards life, a celebration of freedom, creativity, and diversity. And like life itself, jazz continues. Its unstoppable rhythm invites us to keep exploring, to keep dreaming, to keep vibrating to the beat of the music.